This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm Mac Pritchard, your host and publisher of Mac's List. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Ben Forstag, our managing director, and Jenna Forstrom, our community manager. This week, we're talking about how to make the most of a networking event. Our show is brought to you by Hack the Hidden Job Market, the new online course for Mac's List that starts November 1st. As many as 8 out of 10 job openings never get advertised. Is your dream job one of them? Learn how to uncover hidden jobs and get noticed by the hiring managers who fill them. Visit maxlist.org/course. We talk a lot on this podcast about the importance of networking. The reason is simple. It's one of the best ways to find the jobs that never get advertised. Through networking, you can also learn what matters to hiring managers, and you can get great career advice. You can network in different ways. This could include networking events, informational interviews, or volunteering in your field. This week, our guest expert is Angela Copeland. She'll share with us how to make the most of your next networking event. She'll tell us why you should fly solo at a professional mixer, when you should and should not hand out business cards, and how you can stay in touch with the people you meet once you return to your office. We're recording this show in August. Have you just returned from your summer vacation? You might be tempted to use a photo from your trip on your LinkedIn page. In a moment, Ben Forstag will tell us why that's not a good idea, and he'll also share a way to get a great headshot that will impress employers. This week, our listener question comes from Pat Giles. He wonders how to give notice at his job. Jenna Forstrom has advice. As always, let's check in with the Mac's List team first. The three of us, Ben, Jenna, we all go to a lot of networking events. I'm curious, what's the thing you always do at one of these events or perhaps after you return to the office?
Well, I think this is going to be an answer that all three of us echo, which is, I go through the business cards that I've collected or the notes I've taken and then follow up with people on LinkedIn just to make sure that one meeting I had carries over and I have some way of contacting the person on a regular basis and staying in touch with them.
And I'm curious, when you go through those cards, do you connect with everyone you got a card from, or do you think, well, I didn't really have a meaningful conversation with them?
If I can't remember the conversation I had with the person or one meaningful aspect to come out of that conversation, I probably don't do the LinkedIn connection. With LinkedIn, it's the quality of the contacts you have, not the quantity. And so I'm not in a race to have 1,000 contacts or anything. The key is, did I have a conversation where there was some connection we had there or there was some business thing that we could do in the future? And when I reach out to that person on LinkedIn, I actually try to include that in my welcome message saying, it was really great talking to you last night at the event. I really appreciated your thoughts on issue X, whatever issue X might be, and I'm hoping we can keep this conversation going. And that's how I reach out to folks.
Okay. How about you, Jenna?
I always send an email, and I don't ever connect with anyone on LinkedIn, so now I feel like I should try that out. But yeah, I always just go through my business cards and either just send a one-line message that just says, hey, it was great meeting you at last night's XYZ event. Let me know if there's any way Mac's List can help you, if it was like a kind of short conversation, and if it was a longer, like, hey, thanks for hanging out with me at the hors d'oeuvre table and talking about sports, like, can't wait for next week's Timbers match or whatever, and then whatever business-related questions or comments or projects that I wanted to talk to them about in a follow-up way. But
well, I also connect with people on LinkedIn like Ben, and depending on the conversation, I might send a personal follow-up email, like as you do, Jenna. And I do enter the information in the business card into my contact database, and I usually write a 4 or 5 word note there, like along with a date. Met at this association meeting or talked about this, just so I can remember. Have something to jog my memory. I'm curious, what do you two do with business cards after you've either connected on LinkedIn or sent that email?
I have a drawer in my office that's just full of uncategorized, loose-flowing business cards.
What do you hope to do with those one day, Ben?
I have no idea. One day, if we ever need to start a small fire in the office, we'll use it as kindling.
Okay.
But I hold on to them.
Yeah. How about you, Jenna?
I also have a drawer full of business cards. But when I was in college, I saved them and put them in like little sleeves, like in a folder.
I remember those books you used to be able to buy, the little portfolio books.
Yeah, from college.
Yeah.
That died very quickly after college.
I had those in the 80s, I think. Yeah.
Mac, do you type in all the contacts, or do you have like an app that you use that can do like a screen grab, or?
I should have a screen grab app. I know I've tried those in the past and they haven't been successful, but I actually have somebody who helps me with the data entry. And then I throw the card away once I've made the contact and entered the information in my database.
You mean recycle, right?
Yes,
Notice
we are.
how quick we were to jump on that.
Right. We are in Oregon. So recycling is a good habit no matter what state you might live in. Okay, well, thank you both. And let's move on to you, Ben, because every week you're out there exploring the internet, looking for resources our listeners can use. What have you found for us this week?
This week, I want to share a post from LinkedIn that was written by Melissa DeWitt. She's a digital communications manager at UC Santa Cruz, home of the Fighting Banana Slugs, for anyone who out there who's interested in sports mascots.
I've actually been to that campus. It's a cool logo.
Yeah. So this post is called Do-It-Yourself Headshots, and you can even use your iPhone. Odd title, but it tells you what the article is about. So we've talked so many times about the importance of a LinkedIn profile and making sure it looks real professional, and that starts with your headshot.
Okay, and why aren't vacation shots a good idea, Ben?
Well, you've seen some of the vacation shots I share, Mac, on Facebook. You wouldn't want pictures of me tossing my kid up in the air and catching him in the ocean. That's not a very professional shot there. But so Melissa has this great post about if you can't afford a professional headshot, those can cost $200-$300 sometimes. She has some tips on how you can take your own headshot using a friend to help you, or a colleague, and your iPhone. And these are real kind of nuts and bolts practical suggestions for how to set your camera phone settings, how to take advantage of light, how to use natural light versus artificial light, for selecting the right kind of backgrounds and wardrobes, for the right poses depending on what kind of presence you want to show in the photo, and tools for editing and touching up photos. So it's a real soup to nuts solution for creating a nice, professional-looking cover photo for your LinkedIn profile on the cheap. Again, this was a post on LinkedIn. It was called Do It Yourself Headshots, and we'll include a link in the show notes.
Okay. Great idea. Well, thank you, Ben. And if you have an idea for Ben, please write him. His email address is ben@maximus.org, and we may feature your suggestion on the show. Now let's turn to you, our listeners. Jenna Forstrom has been going through the mailbag, but this week I think she has an audio file for us and also the answer to one of your questions. Jenna, what do you have for us this week?
Today's question comes from Pat Giles, and we're going to take a listen to his voicemail right now.
Hi, this is Pat Giles, and I have a question that I wanted to ask you guys regarding interactions with a new employer. I recently started working for a company, and it was kind of on a contract basis, on a part-time basis. And fortunately, I was able to find another full-time job with more reliable working hours and benefits. And I wanted to know what I should do with regard to informing my new employer of this, the one that I had been working for on a part-time basis. I've tried writing an email to ask for just 10 minutes of sit-down face-to-face time, but I've been just given the response that that employer is too busy to sit and meet with me personally. I've even offered to meet with them outside of the standard working hours and have gotten no response in over a week. So I'm wondering what I should do next. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pat, for calling in. First of all, congrats on the new role, mainly because it's full-time with benefits and it sounds like everything you're looking for. But secondly, it sounds like your current manager is kind of tough to work with. So hopefully this new role will be everything you thought it would be. And I was noodling on what you could do, but I feel like you've done everything. You've asked to schedule a meeting. You've offered other solutions when those times weren't available. And I think at this point, you just need to send a really nice 2 weeks notice email and just say, like, thanks for the opportunity, explain why your reasons for leaving, and then just maybe pick a highlight, like, if you've been there for a couple months, like, I really enjoyed working on Project X and learned this stuff. And just don't burn any bridges just don't burn any bridges and just be really polite and send an email. Maybe CC the HR person if you have that contact too, so that everyone's in the loop, because it sounds like that your current manager is really busy, so maybe he'll miss even this email. But Mac and Ben, do you guys have any other tips?
So we've heard variations of this question a lot here at Mac's List. And, I understand where that comes from. But at the same time, I think job seekers forget that most employers know you're not going to be there for your entire life. And I think that's especially true if we're talking about a contract job. I mean, they explicitly hired you for a short-term defined project. And so they're not expecting you to hang around forever. So it does sound like Pat is doing everything he could and probably went above and beyond trying to get an in-person meeting with his supervisor if the supervisor is not located where he works. So at this point, I would agree with Jenna. You just write a nicely worded email, and that's probably what the employer really needs for their HR purposes, just to keep track of that, make sure it was documented.
Yeah, I think you're both spot on, and it's always important to give 2 weeks notice. And you may find that, especially if you're a contractor, your employer doesn't need you for an additional 2 weeks, but give them that option. And those are wise words to live by that you shared, Jenna. Don't burn any bridges. Whatever sector or community you're in, you will likely cross paths with a former employer at some point in your career.
The other thing I throw in sometimes is, if you have a good relationship with the employer and certainly want to maintain a good relationship, you can even inquire, like, can I help you find the person to take over my roles and responsibilities? And in all likelihood, the employer doesn't want your input directly on that process. They might. And I think just offering up whatever services you can provide there, whether it's a referral or anything else, that's just a nice gesture you can offer to the employer.
Yeah, that's a good tip, Ben. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you, Jenna, and thank you, Pat, for the question. If you have a question for us, you can email Jenna, and her address is jenna@maxlist.org, or even better, call our listener line and leave your question as a recording, and we'll play it on the show. That number is area code 716-JOB-TALK, JOB-TALK. These segments with Jenna and Ben are sponsored by Hack the Hidden Job Market. It's our new online course for Mac's List. As many as 80% of all jobs never get posted. Instead, employers fill these openings by word of mouth. Our new course shows you how this hidden job market works. We teach you how to find plum gigs that never appear on a job board, how to stand out in a crowd of applicants, and how to connect with insiders who can help your career. The course has 12 modules, and in each of them you'll get the tools and tips you need to get the work you want. Meaningful work that makes a difference, work that you can love. Hack the Hidden Job Market launches on November 1st. Don't wait. Get updates and lock in the early bird price now. Go to maxlist.org/course. Now let's turn to this week's guest expert, Angela Copeland. Angela Copeland is the CEO of Copeland Coaching. Her firm helps people at all stages of the job search process, including finding the right job, interviewing for a position, and negotiating an offer. Angela is the author of Breaking the Rules and Getting the Job. She also hosts the Copeland Coaching podcast and writes a weekly syndicated newspaper column on careers. She joins us today from Memphis, Tennessee. Angela, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. Now, Angela, today we're talking about networking, particularly networking events. And I think when many people don't start networking at all, or particularly going to an event until they're looking for a job, why isn't that a good idea? Why should they not wait until they're job hunting to start networking?
It's such a great question. I talk to people often who are looking for a job and they wait until they really need a job, or they're not interested to talk to someone that doesn't have a job to offer them. And unfortunately, it's too late, as you mentioned, because the other person that you're networking with doesn't know enough about you to recommend you to anyone. It takes time to build that relationship and for someone to get to know you, know what you're about, know what type of work that you do. It just takes time to build that relationship.
Well, at its heart, networking is about relationships, and there are different ways you can do it. Volunteering is one way, informational interviews is another. This week, we're talking about events. And let's talk about networking events. What's a good way to find events in your field?
Right. I really love networking events, and there are a few really good places. One place to think of is if you were ever a member of any kind of organization, say in college or graduate school, that targets a particular field that you're in, say, the American Marketing Association, the Society for Women Engineers. There are lots of these groups. They are a great place to start. If you don't have a group like this, you might look at a website like meetup.com. There are many groups that are open to the public. Or you can look on your local chamber website. There are many, many young professional or professional types of events that are out there. They're available. And whether or not you're a member, you can often go, at a free or discounted rate if you're a visitor. I often tell people that for some organizations where the membership fee is, say, $300 or $400 a year, if you check, sometimes one of their events might cost $15 or $20 to come as a guest. So it's a really great way to go and to try out different groups to find something that's a good fit for what you're looking for.
And once you find an event that you're interested in, what kind of goals or expectations should you set? I often meet people who say, well, I went to this mixer and I felt awkward. I'm not sure anything really happened, and I'm not sure why I should go again.
Mm-hmm. It's a really good question because people often do feel awkward and uncomfortable and scared when they go to these events. One really good thing to remember is that everyone feels that way. I often will go to events by myself because it forces me to talk to new people that I've never met. If I go with a friend, sometimes I'll just talk to my friend. But when I go in, I often will look for another person that looks like they may also be nervous to be there, and go and introduce myself. And I will typically go in with a goal to exchange my business card with at least 5 people. So if you can kind of set a mental goal for yourself, it makes it a little easier. And if you remind yourself that it's just practice, you don't have to land a job today. This is just one piece of a bigger picture that you're putting together over time.
So you enter the room, you look for people you might chat with, particularly someone standing by themselves, and you've got this idea that you want to exchange business cards with 3 or 4, maybe 5 people. What are those conversations like, and how should people approach them?
I think it really varies. I really love to ask people more personal questions because I find that sometimes at the event, you may be getting asked the exact same question. What do you do? What college did you go to? Things like that. I had an example. I went to a networking event a few years ago, and I met a woman there who was, I think she's maybe a manager or something here in Memphis. And I asked her, what brought you to Memphis? How long have you lived in Memphis? And all of a sudden, she started telling me this really amazing story that she moved here when her child had cancer because Memphis is the home of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And then she started telling me this entire story about how she became world ranked for target shooting of like bow and arrows, and that she picked that up while her child was going through cancer treatment. And all of a sudden I had this new connection and this woman that I knew on a much more personal level. And when I followed up with her afterward, not only was she interested to connect in a business perspective, she invited me to come out and try bow and arrow shooting with her. So, I think if you can try to think of something a little different, a little more personal than just business questions, it can really get you off on the right foot.
That's a memorable story, and I have to share. I was cycling to work one morning about 2 weeks ago, and a fellow passed me on a bike, and he had a quiver full of arrows and a bow on his back as well, which I thought, that could only happen in Portland, Oregon, but it sounds like it could happen in Memphis too.
Apparently not.
So what I love about that story, Angela, is I'm hearing you say you made a personal connection with someone, but it also, that connection was valuable to you professionally as well. Can you talk more about how these kinds of connections can be helpful either in an immediate job search or in managing your career?
Long term, it's really about sort of giving back and investing in someone else, because at the end of the day, oftentimes the person who lands the job is not necessarily the most qualified person. It's often the person who knew the hiring manager, or it's the person that the hiring manager liked the most. And so really creating sort of that personal connection, helps you long term. I think in terms of a short term benefit, one example I have that really helped me in my career, I was living in Los Angeles. I was in business school, and I flew back to Memphis to visit. And I went to a networking event. It was actually a neighborhood association event. It was at a bar. And I went, and the speaker was the CEO for a nonprofit that I was a big fan of. And I didn't know exactly what they did, but I knew that they really were big fans of Memphis as a city. And it's the Convention and Visitors Bureau here, actually. But I went up, and the CEO is quite well known in Memphis. And I waited until he finished, and I introduced myself and said, I'm Angela Copeland. I'm a really big fan of the city, and I'd love a chance to talk to you. And he said, wow, tell me about what you do. And when I told him, he said, you'll never believe this. I just created a job for this exact thing last week. I just got it approved this week. And, you're the perfect person for me to be speaking with today. And of course, that job was not available online. It was just a random occurrence that I went up and talked to this person. And sure enough, they hired me and actually paid to move me back to Tennessee. So it was a networking event where I didn't expect that kind of a result, but sure enough, it happened right away.
That's a great story. And one thing there are a lot of things I like about it. But one of the main things is that there's a strategy to choosing the events that you want to go to, or talking to the people that you want to connect with. I mean, you just don't go to these events willy-nilly, I'm guessing. Is that right?
That's right. You only have so much time. And so you really need to target events where you have a decent chance of meeting people who are either in your field or hiring managers, or who are interested in something that you're interested in, people that you could really connect to. And I think you need to be ready to act if something goes right. The one thing I did not mention about that story is the CEO actually said to me, gosh, if only I could get a copy of your resume. And me being me, I had a copy in my jacket, a full printed copy, and I pulled it out and presented it, which was part of the reason he hired me. But, you need to really target these events. And of course, maybe everyone isn't going to be the right event, but, go get a sense, sample some different events, and try to hone in on what might be the best fit for you.
So other tips about people to approach, say you don't see anyone standing by themselves, and I know people welcome conversations if they're alone at events like this, but if you see a group of 2 or 3 or 4, how do you decide whether to approach smaller groups, Angela? And what kind of clues do you look for, and what do you say when you do go up?
Sure. Well, one clue you can really look for is the body language. So say you have 2 people and they're talking and they're fully engaged and they're facing one another 100%. Maybe that's not the group that you want to walk up to. But say the same 2 people are standing there and they're a little bit open in terms of the angle to one another. They're kind of, talking to each other, but they're looking into the room at the same time. Those 2 people may be more open to the idea of having someone come up and approach them. And often, I really like to just go up and say, hi, my name is Angela Copeland. I'd love to just introduce myself and just start very simply. It's good to have practiced an elevator pitch. Elevator pitches are very important in terms of explaining what you do when someone says, tell me about yourself. But in that moment when you're first meeting someone, it's really about that first impression, much more than it is about sort of reciting, a pitch that you've kind of memorized.
And what's an effective way to make a positive first impression?
I don't think it's as hard as it sounds when you think about it, but oftentimes it's in things like your body language. Look at your posture. Do you look confident? Are your shoulders back? Is there a smile on your face? And are you dressed appropriately, right? So if you're at formal business event, are you, in a suit in the way that would be the most appropriate? Or if you're at something more casual, are you dressed in a way that makes sense for that particular event? And again, just having a smile on your face, making eye contact. I think a good handshake makes a big difference. Often when you're at a networking event and you're meeting a lot of people, you will find sometimes, say, for example, a man shakes a woman's hand, and sometimes he'll kind of give you this like limp noodle sort of thing. And it can be offensive as a woman. So it's really important, also as you're introducing yourself, to shake everyone's hand the same way, to shake it firmly, but not too firmly. And, just to be pleasant and to be authentic.
So have a firm handshake and an elevator pitch, and be warm and friendly and approachable. What about icebreakers to get a conversation going?
Some icebreakers I love to ask are sort of like, where are you from? Where did you grow up? Really simple things that can get someone talking. What brought you here today? Or how long have you been a member of this organization? How did you hear about this organization? Just things that are going to just start a conversation. You just kind of have to open the door a little bit, and oftentimes the other person will come along with you. So it's honestly not as intimidating, I think, as it often sounds. And you have to remember, all of the people who are at the event are most likely there to meet other people as well. So you're not the only one looking to make new contacts.
Yeah, I think that's important to remind people that the folks who do come to these events expect to have these kinds of conversations. So at the start of our conversation, Angela, you suggested people get a certain number of business cards. What's the value of that, and when do you know it's appropriate to offer your card to someone else?
I absolutely love having business cards. Even if you don't have a job, I think it's important to have a card that has your name, your phone number, and your email address. And that can even be useful if you're switching fields altogether. So, my background originally is engineering, and I eventually transitioned into marketing. So, as I was looking for marketing jobs, the last thing I would want to do is hand out a business card that said I'm an engineer. So I think one, piece of value is giving the other person your contact information so that they can stay in touch with you. And then receiving their card back is extremely valuable. I would definitely suggest after the fact going home, emailing that person, sending them a connection request on LinkedIn, and just really starting to stay engaged. Now, not every person will stay engaged with you, but if, say, 1 of 10 does, you know that you're really starting to build successful connections.
Now, let's say you are looking for a job. What are the do's and don'ts at a networking event about talking about a job search?
Well, I think one important thing is not to really start off with that immediately, because if you're really going into any networking relationship looking for something from someone that doesn't know you, it really creates a tough situation for that person. So I would say, start off, try to get to know the person a little bit, and then you may, share with them the type of work that you do. And if they start to ask more questions, you may share more information. At the end of the conversation, it's often appropriate to say something like, I've really enjoyed meeting you today. Is there any possibility that I might be able to, have a coffee with you next week, and I could ask you a few more questions about your company, for example. But I think oftentimes when it comes to networking in general, you want to try to take as much of a non sort of pressure approach as you can. Almost think of it like informational interviewing as much as looking for a job. It's more about building relationships than asking for something from each person that you meet. So
when you walk out of that event at the end of an afternoon or evening, how do you know it's been a success? It's practice over time. So I wouldn't say there's going to be a success versus failure. But if you walk out, you've learned something new, you've met a few new people, you have at least one person that you may be able to follow up with again, you've gotten those 5 business cards. You can start to say to yourself, this is a success. And I think also if you're into measurement, which I know I am, I will often send, emails or LinkedIn requests to those people and then kind of measure how many of the people accepted or how many of those people responded to the emails. And if you keep track of that over time,
you may see that it continues to grow and improve as you get better and better at networking.
Yeah, I like that. I think we share an analytical bent. Well, all great advice, Angela. Now tell us what's coming up next for you.
Well, it's a great question. Thank you for asking. As you mentioned, my book, Breaking the Rules and Getting the Job, it is currently an ebook, but I'm working to actually put the paperback out on Amazon very soon. So that's really exciting. And there'll be a link to it on my website.
Well, great. We'll be sure to include that in the show notes, and people can learn more about you, I know, by visiting your website, which is copelandcoaching.com. And your Twitter handle is @CopelandCoach. And you have a podcast, Copeland Coaching, which is available on iTunes and Stitcher. And we'll include links to all of those resources in the show notes. Angela, thank you for joining us this week.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're back in the Maxless studio with Jenna and Ben. So what did you two think? What were some key takeaways for you on the conversation I had with Angela?
Well, I loved her story about having the resume already in her coat pocket. And, we always tell people...
Can you tell she's a career counselor?
Yeah, definitely. We always tell people, don't ask for a job in these networking events. I guess the caveat there is, unless someone is literally telling you, I'm hiring right now. Do you know anyone who's great for this position? And in that case, you do want to have a copy of your resume sitting someplace. It's the kind of thing, you don't want to have to use it. Or I guess you do want to have to use it, but you're probably not going to. But just to have it on hand. The other thing that she said that captured my attention, because I never thought of it before, was using your local chambers of commerce to find networking events, which I've heard a lot of different suggestions of where you could find networking events. Never that one. So you learn something new every day.
That was a good one. And Meetup is a great resource. You can find all sorts of interest groups and different industries represented there.
Yeah.
I really liked her make personal connections story about how she was at a networking event and met this lady who had a kid that had cancer and that's why she was in town, and then ended up being a world-class bow hunter. And I just think that that's a great way to make connections. Just be friendly. It's common sense, but I feel a lot of people go to networking events and they're just totally freaked out, or they just want to talk to one person and they ignore everyone else because they're focused on CEO person A or hiring manager person B. And it's well, there's other people in the room of 30 people to talk to, and they might be friends with person A or B, but they also might have their own opportunities. So you just have to be open when you show up at a networking event to talk to anyone.
And we know that most people find their jobs through networking, but you never know which networking contact is the person who's going to ping you into that great job, right? And so you can't spend all your time focused on I'm going to talk to this one person over here, because you might be missing these 29 other people who have that secret job that they're just itching to find the right person for. And so I always encourage people just go out, and you want to be strategic, but also sometimes you just want to go out and just meet people, because you really never know who's got what other connection out there. And you can be pleasantly surprised by the random person that you meet.
Definitely.
And I loved her point about this being a long-term investment. You go to these events, and its success, I think, does look like having a few meaningful conversations and making a real, authentic connection with another person. It's not about getting a job offer over the canapes or getting in front of some prestigious hiring manager, though those things might happen, but they're not likely to. Instead, it's, again, so much of job searching is about connecting with others, and networking events give you the opportunity to do that. Well, thank you both, and thank you, our listeners, for joining us. If you like what you hear today, please sign up for our free weekly newsletter. In each issue, we give you the key points of that week's show. We also include links to all the resources mentioned, and you get a transcript of the full episode. If you subscribe to our newsletter now, we'll send you our job seeker checklist. You'll find in one easy-to-use file all the steps you need to take to find a great job. Get your free newsletter and checklist today. Go to maxless.org/podcast. And join us next Wednesday. Our special guest will be Michelle Ward. She'll explain why you should always treat your career as if you were an entrepreneur. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job.